Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rise of Justice Movement, the podcast. My name is Zachary Mallory, and I am the founder and the host of the Rise of Justice Movement and the Rise of Justice Movement, the podcast. All right, so today is May 1st. It's May Day. People took to the streets to protest the Trump administration, but not just the Trump administration, to fight for better wages, to fight for health care, and they went on strike. So today is May Day. We were in full support of the efforts that were organized across the country. And with that being said, I'm here with another addition to our candidate series. And today I am joined by Nico. Nico, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really honored, especially on International Workers' Day on May Day, to speak about the plights of the workers and the struggles that many of us have gone through over the past decades, centuries, even, right? So, yes, thank you for that opportunity.
Speaking of which, that's going to bring us into the first talking point. So, walk us through what your background is, who you are, and why you are running for office, because it is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this again, it is incredibly important to get progressive voices running at all levels of office all across the country. It does not matter how big or how small, how suburban, how rural, etc. your election is, because every single election matters. And a lot of focus is obviously on Congress for a lot of reasons. And we're going to dive into, those questions I just asked you. I tend to ramble, but
All good. I do too.
well, good. We're going to be in good company for this next hour, so I'm glad to hear that. Um, but it's important to get progressive voices running at all levels of office, because we can make a lot of change on the state level, on the local level. I didn't realize how important it was to have progressive voices on a local water board until my local GOP decided to try to privatize public utilities,
Wow.
which is insane
Wow.
to me.
The audacity. Yeah.
Literally the audacity, the freaking audacity. But speaking of running for office, walk us through who you are, why you're running, and why it's imperative to get voices like yours elected. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend. No, so yes, thank you for that. I am a candidate running for local office for Georgia House District 109. It's in the heart of Gwinnett County. We are the upper Atlanta suburbs of Atlanta. And look, I am the only son actually of two Colombian immigrants. They immigrated from Colombia, from Bogota, when they were in their 20s. They came for the American dream, a better life, which is, of course, the story of so many immigrants who come to this country looking for opportunities and chances, right? And so my parents were no different. They came in here, and of course, they worked day and night to make ends meet, and they had me. And growing up, I grew up in this public school system right here. I grew up as someone who knew what injustice looked like, right? When I would see my parents come home with very little money, even though they work so hard, right? And unfortunately, we have heard stories of that where there is the issue of labor injustice, right? Where now we have corporations and big businesses who are, again, they are given the green light by our government here, especially in Georgia, by our local and state governments, to abuse workers. And so early on, as a child, I realized that when I would look at our bills, I would look at the struggles we had. I know that my parents were suffering and almost in silence because, of course, they can't tell their child, their 10-year-old child, what it's like to struggle to pay taxes and rent and mortgage and all that, right? So I knew about that. Now, of course, I also knew that when my mom unfortunately was diagnosed with breast cancer, stage 3 breast cancer, when I was younger, I also knew that she wasn't insured. And because I knew that was because of the multiple bills that would always accumulate or rack up that would nearly put our family in debt. And so issues such as wage inequality, such as the refusal of Georgia to expand Medicaid so that people like my mom would have healthcare insurance, these are issues that I grew up with. And these are issues that are not unique to just myself, my family, but I know that it is plentiful. It is apparent for many others in our area. In fact, I tell people that 1 in 10 residents in my district live under the poverty line. And that is a big issue that, again, part of my campaign is focused on is affordability, accessibility, but also relief, because right now we are dealing with a cost of living crisis that is running rampant throughout the state, but specifically in my district, where there is a vast level of inequality, especially even in our own county, where you go up to North Gwinnett versus South Gwinnett and Central Gwinnett, where we live in, and there is a big difference in infrastructure, in schools, in development. And so all that to say is that I grew up seeing the injustice, seeing the inequalities, and that led me to work. I worked in government, I worked in nonprofits, I worked advocacy movements as well, focused on language equity. I myself, of course, as a son of two immigrants, I knew Spanish. I was able to translate for my neighbors, translate for others, and that led me to explore what it meant to help people. And of course, that led me to then working in government, working constituent services, and then fast forward to where I'm at right now. The whole platform, what's the key tenets of this campaign are affordability, are accessibility, but most importantly, public excellence, constituent service servants, where I'm able to serve the people directly, and that way people know who I am, what I do, and what will I do for them. So, in a nutshell, that's my background, my roots. Grew up in the area, and from now, I know that I have set my mission, my goal to help people. That is what I want to do. I don't want to go to DC. DC is filled with corruption, filled with people that unfortunately are coming maybe for the right reasons, but they don't actually have results that we can point at and look at. Whereas those at the local level, which I'm glad you mentioned with the whole GOP takeover of the water board, there is so much power that is concentrated at the local level, at the city level, at the county commission level, that people don't realize that. People don't realize the power they have by electing quality progressive officials who are focused on positive and good results, right? So yeah, that is in a nutshell who I am, what I do, and what I want to offer the people in my district of 109.
Thank you for sharing that, first of all, because I think it's incredibly important to recognize where people come from. And
Yeah,
oftentimes politicians forget about where they come from.
yeah.
And do you know why that is? The reason is very easy. Do you know why that is?
Let me guess, it's corruption. It's companies buying them out, it's lobbyists buying them out.
That's exactly where I was getting ready to go, is
Yeah.
thinking about money and politics, because oftentimes we hear about the APAC influence on Congress. We
Yeah.
hear about, Palantir that's,
Yes.
doing a lot of these flock cameras and
Correct.
all of
Oh,
this pro surveillance.
bad.
We have a constitution for a reason. And we also have the right to due process, which we'll dive into here in just a little bit.
Of course.
Because I want to know about like ICE and like DHS, like in your area, but we'll get into that here in just a little
Of
bit.
course.
But first things first, money and politics. So on your website, and you very proudly say it, that is why our campaign. Well, first of all, let me back up here. You said, I know that real power comes from the people, and that change only comes when ordinary people come together on a grassroots. I feel like this needs to be bolded, underlined, and like all kinds of different things,
Exactly.
but level to build community power. That is why our campaign will not, and I love how this is capitalized, will not take any corporate PAC money, pander to lobbying groups, and will instead run off of small dollar donors and a grassroots mobilization that Gwinnett has never seen before. We can't do this alone. We need your help. That right there tells me that in the state of Georgia, and Georgia is not any stranger to whenever it comes to organizing, whenever it comes to politics. So, walk me through what this means. What does it mean on the grassroots level to build the true community power, fight back against, oligarchy? There's also a lot of money in politics in Georgia. Um,
There
I have
is.
sat down and interviewed Aaron Baker, who's running in District 51
Mm-hmm.
against a alleged Democratic incumbent. But
Yeah.
looking at some of the donations, it's like I would have to disagree with that. We have a name
Correct.
for this, and it's called Democrat in name only.
I
Anyway,
know. Yeah.
so walk me through what has been your experience running this grassroots campaign and what that looks like to build that community power?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It's been rewarding. It's been fulfilling. I think that now, without the pressures of having to answer to some sort of shady oligarch or some corporation or, any of these big corporations that come in, right? They set up their base here in Georgia, but they do not benefit actual workers, actual Georgia workers. And so I feel like a weight lifted off my shoulder because the only people that I have to be accountable to are the people in my district. That is all. They are my only boss. I do not have a boss that's up in DC. I don't have a boss, not even my own caucus, right? The only boss is that I respond to are the people of 109. I am very firm on that, which is why I mean every single word I said when I put down on my website, when I put down on my graphics, on my social media posts, when I'm out there at candidate forums, the debates. I say very clearly, I do not take, and I will never take, ever, a single penny from any corporate PAC, any sort of special interest money that would ever take away my full focus on delivering results for people of my district. That's it. As simple as that. And I think some people they'd like to, find words around. They're like, oh well, what about this loophole? What about that loophole? Oh, is crypto a pack? Oh, is that a pack? It's like, oh, is Palantir a Chevron? The Chevron count as that? I'm like, look, you do not play dumb with me, right? We know what are corporations and what are not corporations. Obviously, I don't mean, okay, well, leadership packs. Yeah, well, these are people that, again, are donating me $5, $10. Look, my average donation is around $20, right? I have people who, frankly, are actually in my district. The vast majority of people are in Georgia who donate, and they donate small amounts, reoccurring amounts. And if I looked at it, I would say that the majority of people there also are around 30s, 20s. I have students who are donating. And look, I know I was most recently a student at a university, and I know how tough it is to even donate $10, $20 to any campaign. And so for that, I am eternally grateful for people that are willing to take money out of their hard-earned paychecks to say, hey, I have a progressive candidate. I have a grassroots candidate that I want to support. And it means a lot because, look, all of this is what I take with me. Every single door I knock, every single phone I make, I have this in mind. I have the people that support me, and I know what goes into this campaign, and it fills me with confidence. It fills me with the appreciation and also with the drive to say, hey, you know what? There may be days that are tough. Look, there have been many days in this campaign that has been tough for me, tough for my campaign staff, but we power through because we know that people have sacrificed too much time, money, blood, sweat, tears for this campaign, for not even this campaign, but for this movement, because I represent a larger, greater movement. It is a progressive movement. It is a working class movement. It is a movement that even sometimes we feel isolated within our own party because we feel like some, let's say, corporate Democrats feel like, no, well, we want to, deal with the status quo. We want to, keep with the way that things were. And I say, look, we cannot have that. There is a reason why we are losing. There is a reason why in 2020 we won with around what 100 a million right votes, and now what 2024 we lost. We lost by over 100,000 votes, and we are the state that elected John Ossoff, that elected Raphael Warnock, that elected Biden in 2020. We flipped single-handedly. We flipped the Senate. So you cannot tell me that the way things have worked before in the past is working now, because we have eyes, we have ears, we have people, neighbors who live in the district who are telling us the exact same thing. They say, look, I'm tired of the Democratic Party. I identify as independent now. I lean progressive, I lean Democratic, but this party does not represent who I truly am. And so that is one reason, that is one way they were saying, look, again, corporate money needs to go. It should be banned. We need to this whole process of having corporations spending money on behalf of candidates should be gone. They're spending too much money on candidates, and as a result, candidates are able to say, "Well, let me look the other way." While this big corporation spending money on my behalf, no, you are complicit. You are. Again, these corporations are paying millions to put you in the airwaves. That's not grassroots. It's not. And
Is
Citizens, yeah, like Citizens United, again, terrible. Should never happens, right? That's another thing where we just have again so much the ability to infuse millions of dollars of shady money where we don't know it's come from, right? It is again sanctioned by the government. It is allowed by the government. It's allowed by the courts, which it should never be that case, but it is right now. So yeah,
Mhm.
we have to do our own parts, and I feel very passionate, very strongly about this specific topic because I myself have been in a race where my opponent has been, of course, using lawyer money, rich lawyer money. He's using money where he's able to pay for mailers and messages and whatnot, right? And he's not really actually involved in the community, involved with many people where they're at. You could raise $100,000, but if you're not using it effectively, you do not gain the trust. You do not win the trust of the voters, which is tantamount. It is importance.
You said a key thing, and I want to point it out.
Yeah,
And the one key thing that you said is you don't have a boss, but the people in your district are the ones that are your boss.
they
Like
are
it that is so incredibly crucial. Again,
correct.
I think that whenever an elected official gets elected, or a
Yeah,
politician gets elected, they forget where they come from. They forget about their constituents because all that matters is those dollar signs. And literally that's
correct.
all it is that's all it is to them. And I see this on both sides of the aisle, some more than others. Um, I'm thinking about the US senator that's on a book tour. Um, I'm
Yes,
gonna keep my mouth shut, but it's definitely a lot.
it has.
Um, and then I'm also thinking about just, and I've said it numerous times on this podcast. If you're older than 2010, you are older than Citizens United versus FEC.
Correct.
The disastrous Supreme Court ruling that essentially said that corporation and money is free speech, which is insane to me. So you're mean to tell me that the dollar that is in my wallet has more value, has more value than a human being, right?
Yeah, yeah. They want you to
So,
believe that.
so my question is, where in your in let me think of how to phrase this. In your opinion, how do we get money out of politics? Because there is a lot of ways to do it.
Correct.
Now, it would take a constitutional amendment from Congress
Yes.
in order to overturn Citizens United or even take a stab at it. But what can we do as far as taking some steps to get to that constitutional amendment? Because there's things
Correct.
you can do in Georgia, there's things that I can do here in Kansas, there's things we can do on the state level. What are some of those steps that you would think about kind of like proposing in the state of Georgia to just kind of make sure that people understand how important it is to have progressive voices elected that will actually fight for the working class, for the
Correct.
immigrant communities, for the LGBTQ plus community, for anybody else who is marginalized. Disabled
Correct.
communities gets left out of the conversation. But
They do.
what do you think?
So that's a good question, and I'm glad you mentioned the word progressive because unfortunately, right, we cannot necessarily substitute that word with democratic because we have seen some Democrats who have refused to get money out of politics. And so it is not simple. Here in Georgia, we are, of course, majority Republican in trifecta. We have both in the House chamber, Senate chamber, and the governor's seat, right? So it's not just as easy as flipping the House and Senate, right? Because by the way, that itself is an ordeal. That's difficult for us to do, and we are doing that. But I will say that the key word is progressive, continuing to push for progressive policies, even if we don't have the majority in the chambers. We have candidates who are pushing. We have candidates who are saying, "Hey, I cannot maybe out fundraise my opponent who's taking so much, millions of corporate PAC money, right? But I have the support of the people. I have the support of hundreds of volunteers who are willing to spend a couple hours of their weekends or their weekday and knock doors, call voters, right? Do postcard parties, sign waving, right? There are so much ways to volunteer and uplift local progressive candidates, and I think it's easy to fall into the trap of, oh, well, our vote's not going to matter, it's not going to count. It is going to count if you make it so. We cannot fall into the trap that Republicans and even some Democrats have in mind. They want us to give up. They want us to refuse to move the needle forward because we know the status quo is not working. We know that money, dirty corporate money should not be in politics, should be left out of politics. So before we get into the whole constitutional amendment, right? Let's again, the reality is that people on the grounds, and I will say even this, even with Republicans, even with some more conservative voters, right? They agree with this. They see these big corporations who are coming in, who are buying out their politicians. They don't agree with that. They don't because even if they may have conservative social values, right, or views, deep down they know that they want to live a dignified life. They know they want to have a roof over their head, put food on the table, to send their kids off to college, right? And so we can work together on that to say, look, this is a bipartisan issue. This is an issue that should affect everyone. This is not a Democrat versus Republican. That's not a black versus white. This is not a Muslim versus Jewish or any of that, right? Like these divisions, they keep on forcing us into these divisions time and time again. This is class war. This is rich versus poor, the top 1% versus everyone else. It is simple as that. That is the way that we need to frame it. That is what is getting us results. That is what got us results last year, last election, when we flipped different seats because we said, hey, we are not content with the status quo. We want to flip these seats because, sure, we want more Democrats there, but also we want more collective power with the people in the district, not corporations, not big businesses, with the people themselves. And that so far has been very receptive in Georgia. I can't say, I don't know for other states, but in Georgia, where I live, where I do work, where I organize, where I had my first job organizing here for a campaign, it so far has worked wonders for us. And so I think we continue down this pathway. We could very well see a way in Georgia that we can then either ban or subtly ban, or I guess rather any politician who says I'm going to take corporate money is seen as deeply unpopular, and they will be primaried. That is what we're going to do right now.
Yes, 100%. And it doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, whatever, you're going to be primaried. And I think that's critical to note as well.
Correct.
And something else that's critical is obviously the cost of living continues to increase. Wages stay the same. Speaking of which, I know you have it on your platform. I'm going to let you kind of pop off here
Of course.
because there's an obvious reason for why people can't afford things in the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let you kind of talk about that for a second. First of all, because there's an issue with the minimum wage. There's a
Correct.
huge issue, and I'll let you take it from here. Kind of walk us through what some of those concerns that you were hearing.
So the concerns that you're referring to that I have seen on the grounds is the issue of our minimum wage. We have the lowest minimum wage in the entire United States of America, $5.15. $5.15, which is incredibly low, as we all know. And you might have some, lobbyists, corporate lobbyists, who say, "Oh, well, actually, it's 7.25," which, I mean, what you're adding $2.10? Is that really much more? Is that really what people can afford to live in a single-family housing unit, to live and to put food on the table, to pay rent, utility bills? Gas alone is incredibly expensive because of this war that no one voted for, that no one signed up for. Our taxpayer money used to fund genocide, to fund overseas conflicts and wars. No, 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 no. We're not doing that, right? We're not. And so, because of that, I think that the minimum wage has become an issue that unfortunately has been not even trivialized, but it's controversial in some Republican and Democratic spaces where they say, oh well, the argument of small businesses can't support it, which we have seen time and time again that if we continue to put things like tax credits, if we put more investments into small businesses, if we remove red tape, if we actually have a good Secretary of State who is able to support small business, because that is what they're elected to do, if we have government entities that do their job, we can support small businesses. Because right now we are, and you will go to Georgia, Republicans will lie to you and say, or will mislead you, and they will say Georgia is the number one state in the country to do business in. But there is a heavy, heavy, large asterisk, which is that it is good for big corporations, not for small businesses. not for the mom and pop businesses there. They are more likely to fail within the first year than them succeeding. And so because of that, right, we need to again say full-heartedly that we support minimum wage increase. That we are tired of excuses. We are tired of that because we know there is money. We are sitting on a 14.7 billion with capital B billion-dollar reserve funds here in Georgia. And so you cannot lie to me and say, no, we don't have enough money. We do. We do have enough money, right? We are asking for a $20 minimum wage. Now, I want to be realistic to our viewers out there, right? Given that I think the states in the country that has the highest, either California, New York, right, it's around $15, and of course, the cost of living there is higher than it is here in Georgia. But even then, right, with 20 an hour, we also need to account for inflation. We have seen our gas prices rising. We've seen our grocery prices rising. Of course, we all know, right, that Trump he campaigned initially on the promise of, oh well, let me reduce the prices of groceries, let me reduce the prices of eggs, when reality has gone up from then. And so we know that the minimum wage must be increased. Not only should it be increased, of course should it be increased, but it must be increased. And so we're looking for $20 minimum wage. We're looking for things like ensuring that we have more employment opportunities, right, for people especially coming out of college. And ultimately, we're looking for more labor support, more, especially now. I'm glad to mention this on International Workers' Day, on May Day, is that we need more labor and more worker protections. That's it. It goes hand in hand. We increase our wages. We ensure that we have protections for our workers because they are the lifeline of this state's economy. There's so much to be done, and we cannot do nearly as much as we want to if our wages stay stagnant. If it stays at $5.15 an hour, it cannot.
When was the last time the wage was updated?
Oh, it's been, I want to say almost a decade, if not more. And I think last time it got updated, it was an extremely low number. And so Republicans, even though we were, I believe what it was after 2000, they had seen the economy. They knew that for a fact that people can't live on $5.15. And so we have seen time and time again that people in these higher government positions and leadership positions, they are out of touch. They don't know what it's like to suffer, to struggle, to pick between paying your medical bills, right, to paying off your credits, to choosing the electric bill or which bill to pay off of, or to have a nice meal. They don't know what it's like because they are no longer in that position, right? We lack a number of working class roots people that actually serve and that stay true to their values. Because what may end up happening is you'll have some people that grew up in rural Georgia, right, and they couldn't afford their rent, they couldn't afford all the things, right? They who knows, maybe lived in a trailer park, who knows? But the reality is that they now are completely avoiding and ignoring a big part of their community, their constituency that's saying, look, we need support. We cannot live like this. We cannot live on 5.15 an hour. We cannot live like this, especially if we're talking about our public service workers, right? Talk about things like teachers, for example, right? Teachers are one of the most underfunded, underappreciated workers here in the States. And Governor Kemp is refusing. What he likes to do, which is quite frankly an insult, is he puts a band-aid. He says, hey, take $100, take $200. That's it. And that itself is not going to help with rent, with utilities, with any of that. We're looking for raising the base pay. We're looking for adding more protections, more union protections for teachers. We're looking to ensure that they have more PTO and paternal leave and paid time off and all of that, right? We're looking for that. We're not looking for, oh, here's $100. Throw it. Okay, I'm good because Governor Kemp gave us some money. No, we have so much more to give workers, to give people like our teachers, that it is an insult. It is a slap in the face of anyone who hears what the Republicans have in mind. So yeah, that I feel very strongly about issues about our wages, and I don't like excuses that Republicans give saying no, we can't because the small business will suffer. No, you are causing our small businesses to suffer. Your suffocating policies are causing our small businesses to suffer, not us, not minimum wage increase.
Exactly. 100%. $100. Okay. That barely goes to put a full tank of gas in somebody's car right now. Because you mentioned about it earlier. You mentioned about the war. You mentioned about genocide. Because It's absolutely true. And we need to
Mm-hmm.
call it exactly as such.
Correct.
Because, and you know what else is raising these prices? AI data centers, which Georgia is no stranger to. So that's going to be my next thing.
Yes.
So we see the AI data centers popping up, but they're mainly in areas that are disproportionately affected because there's marginalized communities within those areas. Not to say that they're not building them into Atlanta, because I know they are, or being discussed, or being talked about if they're not
Yes.
already there. Just like the concentration camps. Okay, they're DHS is going through buying up these warehouses and they're turning them into literally concentration camps. Let's call them exactly
Yeah.
what they are. These are not
Yeah.
detention centers because these people are being denied the right to due process, which will be the next thing that we'll dive into here in just a second. But I want to talk about the AI data centers and some of the concerns that you're hearing about, if any, from any of your constituents that are in your district. And what
Correct.
are some of those concerns? Because I know here in Kansas and Missouri, the cost of utilities, the cost, like the water,
Yeah.
um, there's a number of different things. They also put out a lot of pollution. Like there's a lot of concerns. So what are some of those concerns that you're hearing about from your district specifically?
So for context, we have two data centers in Gwinnett County, right? There are, of
Good
course,
job.
various data centers throughout Metro Atlanta. Now, what I am pushing for, because of concerns, not only for my constituents, but also, again, I am someone as if elected, a state representative affects every single Georgian, millions of Georgians, right? So I know that I speak for the vast majority of Georgians all over the state, which is that they want a moratorium on data centers. They want a moratorium on data centers. We are saying, look, pause, pause. Call it temporary, call it permanent, but we right now cannot continue to rubber stamp every single Georgia Power proposed data center because, as we've seen before, right now it is bringing more damage than it is bringing good to these communities. The data centers, their argument is that okay, well, we're going to come in, we're going to have all these different jobs come in, right? We're going to boost the economy. Well, what about the people that live there? What
Mm-hmm.
about the actual people that live there? People that have lived there many generations that are now complaining about dirty water,
Mm-hmm.
about lead in water pipes, about the environmental, let's call it what it is, environmental racism, because they're not putting these data centers on the wealthy, affluent neighborhoods, which are predominantly white. They're putting it in predominantly black and brown communities because
Which
they
is
know
intentional.
it is intentional. It is. It is. They know that our communities, we have so much on our plate. We have so much that is it realistic for us to sometimes go to our public comments? It may not be because, again, we are primarily blue collar workers, people that work 9 to 5, people that don't have time to go to their city council meeting, their board of commissioner meeting. And so, because of that, right, they do this intentionally. They know they can steamroll through our communities. They show us something, right? And the reality is something much more different. And so we are looking for a pause, a moratorium specifically on data centers because they are not now benefiting this community. They are not. And unless we say anything different, then for now we do not have any business having these data centers open up or continue its operation. We don't. Not for the people in this district, right? They didn't ask us for a vote. That's the thing. Maybe it was for a vote, yeah, but they don't allow us to vote on this. The people of Gwinnett County did not vote for this, and so that is also what I'm kind of frustrated by is that some elected officials take it upon themselves to say, look, let me bring in all these corporations, all these businesses, all these developments, and I'm like, well, development are good for who exactly? Not for the people here. You go to Gwinnett County when you come to Georgia. I will personally show you myself that these roads are lined with constructions, lined with these apartment buildings being built up. But you look at the prices; these are insane, skyrocketed, inflated. People that have lived here for several generations cannot afford a single one of any of the rents in those new apartment buildings, in these new housing complexes. So tell me, who exactly are you doing construction for? It's not for the people that's lived there all their life here in this district. It's not for people outside to come in, people that are not aware of the struggles of the working class communities to come in. And this is an example of data centers where they're using it as an excuse to say, look, let me build this area, let me replace, demolish this entire area, right? This park, this green space. No. Like I am very much pro environmental advocacy, pro clean environment. I mean, there's a reason why in our state of Georgia, you might be familiar with it. It's called Georgia Conservation Voters. It is the leading organization for pro-environmental policies. And I got endorsed by them because they know that I speak truth. I speak truth to power. That they know that they understand that the issues that are facing our community is apparent, that it needs to be brought up, because we cannot have politicians who will get elected as Democrats, as progressives, and then turn the other way when they have these data centers coming in saying, hey, look the other way. I'm going to build my data center. You get a nice little check on the side. You get nice little grants here. That's it. Look away. No, I cannot in good faith do that.
Because what would that do to your community? What would that do to the people that are relying on just to
It
live?
would devastate them. You don't even have to look that far away to look at, let's say, North Georgia, where you
Mhm.
have had corporations that are these companies that are putting in all their dirty chemicals. It's called PFAS, right? Or forever chemicals. And especially in Dalton, the carpet capital of the industry, right? We have seen these companies that have gotten away with little to no regulation restrictions at all, or consequences rather. In fact, you have state capital members, you have state legislators like myself, or what I tend to be. You have people in my position who are now passing bills saying that the liability is no longer there, that corporations will no longer have liability, right? And fortunately, that bill was extremely unpopular in that district, but it
Mhm.
did not stop the Republican-led legislature from even entertaining that. That is how far on the wrong way we've gotten, where now we're looking to absolve liability from these corporations that are deliberately infecting these areas. They're affecting our waterways, our air, our road, and everything. And as a result, we see murky water. We see unclean, unsafe water that, again, we don't know the study. Well, we do know studies, right? We've seen it, like look at Flint, Michigan, for example, right? We've seen how devastating that has been to that community. I never ever want that for any part of Georgia, but especially for the people that I live with. I cannot, and I would feel like a failure if I would ever allow that to
Mhm.
happen on my watch.
Mhm. Because we, the people, have the power to stop it.
We
We
do.
just need people to show up in mass to protest
That's it.
these. And the moral of the story, and I hate to be like this, but people are going to die.
Yeah.
And that is the reality of it. That is the reality in which we currently have because of all it. You know what, Nico? It all
Mhm.
comes down to the money in politics and the influence of it.
It
Because
does.
there's a common denominator here, and it's those goddamn dollars, right? It's those dollar signs. And literally, what you and me and those of us who are the poor and the working class, we are just dollar signs to these big ass corporations. And it's not just, the AI data centers. It also goes down to the polluters, aka, these fossil fuel companies. It goes to Palantir that's trying to push mass surveillance. I mean, for God's sakes, our Pentagon is using freaking AI, which is nuts to
Correct.
me. That is insane to me.
It is.
And then there's also like AI policing that's being talked about, which is beyond absurd and beyond insane to me. Here in Kansas City, I'm going to give you an example. Here in Kansas City, they're using drones. Okay. And what I mean by that, this is insane. I didn't believe it until I read it. And I had to read this article at least a dozen and a half times just to make sure like I completely like comprehended because I felt like my head like just it got bigger like trying to comprehend this and try to understand. You know that one episode of SpongeBob where he forgets something and they go through like all these files and it
Yeah.
shows that? That's what
Yeah.
happened in my brain. And
That was you. Yeah.
I feel like it short circuited because I was trying to understand that they're using, and it's supposed to determine if they need police to respond. Keep in
Yeah.
mind, keep this in mind. Kansas City, Missouri is not locally controlled. What I mean by that is the community does not control the police department. It is controlled by the governor's office. Kansas City is one of the last departments, I believe, either, and I need to look at this on like a national scale, but I know for sure it is the last department in Missouri. Well, actually, that's not correct. St. Louis is now too, because the state legislature voted to have St. Louis under state control as well. Here's my thing: a governor should not have any control over a police department whenever we, the taxpayers, are funding it. Whenever the police department is receiving like over 90% of the city's annual budget, that leaves less than 10% in most cases that goes to community services. Meanwhile, some of the potholes, and I've heard about potholes in Georgia too, some of the
It's bad.
potholes, you're going to be in one zip code. You hit that pothole a certain way, you're going to wind up in another zip code
Correct. It's
because of
bad.
how huge they are. What happens whenever sinkholes turn into, well, what happens whenever a pothole turns into a
Yep.
sinkhole? It has happened numerous times, and it's going to continue being a huge problem. Speaking of being a huge problem, it leads me right into the next thing. DHS, ICE, it needs to be abolished. You know, if you were older than 2003, you
Correct.
are older than the Department of Homeland Security, which was created out of alleged fear. And I say
Correct.
alleged because it was created after 9/11, you know, the whole Muslim fear, and we did the Muslim ban. These people are just human beings.
They are.
They have a right, just like anybody else, to practice whatever freaking religion anybody wants it. This is not a Christian nation. We have
Correct.
multiple cultures, we have multiple generations of people that are here. No human being is illegal on stolen land. Okay,
Correct.
my grandmother was Native American. That got drilled into my head from a
Yes.
very young age. And one thing that I have always been passionate about is protecting our immigrant neighbors. That is something that is my top priority.
Yes.
Whenever I see Miss Rachel fighting like hell for her
Yeah.
littles, for her children, and I've mentioned this so many times on this podcast, and I'm going to say it again. I grew up on Mr. Rogers. Mr.
Mm,
Rogers was the helper. He talked about the helpers. You know who they're going after? They're going after the helpers.
they are.
They're going after the helpers. Mr. Rogers would be deeply disappointed in what's happening right now. Miss Rachel is this generation's Mr. Rogers. She is the helper. She's helping the children in Gaza. She is
Yes.
uplifting the children in Congo, which is also going through a genocide.
They are.
See a common denominator. And then
They
also
do.
Sudan.
Hmm.
And then we see what's happening in Lebanon. We see what's happening with Iran. We see what's
Yeah.
happening in all of these foreign conflicts, right? We see
Correct.
this and it trickles down to the taxpayers, which is why you're paying a higher price at the gas pump, which is
Yep.
why $20 at a grocery store used to buy like a whole basket full. Not anymore. That's literally
No.
like a gallon of milk, a thing of bread, and maybe, just maybe, those powdered donuts that I
Maybe.
personally love. But maybe I like
Yeah.
having a little snacky snack every time.
I love it too.
But it it also hurts the pocketbook because it's
It
like,
does.
do I really need this? I'm
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, I kind of don't, but I'm still gonna do it because
Correct.
consumerism. But it's just,
No.
but anyway, what has ICE looked like in your district across the state of Georgia, and what has been that community response? Because
Correct.
we're seeing massive responses all across the country. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
we saw what happened in Minneapolis, we saw what happened in Los Angeles, but Georgia's left out of the conversation. The South in general is left out of this conversation. The entire South. I mean, look what's happening in Georgia with the Supreme Court ruling, or Louisiana with the Supreme
No,
Court
well,
ruling.
yeah, but that's
And
affecting every other state.
yes,
That is right.
yes,
I'll get into that in Georgia for a second, but here on the topic of ICE, collectively, the response here is that we believe in abolishing ICE. We believe that ICE should be removed from our streets because they have no business being here. And I say that because also this is not something that's just exclusive to this administration. We all know that in previous administrations we have had deportations. Now, the argument there is that perhaps they were more perhaps what cordial, or they were a bit more like, they had some virtue of due process, right? Which, okay, sure. But now we are completely disregarding due process, right? Which is again unconstitutional. That is in the Constitution. Every single person, regardless of whether or not you are a citizen, if you are on American lands, if you fall within the boundaries of the American borders, you are entitled to these constitutional amendment protections, including due process. And I think people forget that. They forget to realize that is also applying to every single undocumented immigrant that is out there. And so, because of that, look, we and Republicans, unfortunately, have been demonizing demonizing immigrants for far too long. I was in an interview the other last month, and in the interview there was a clip that was played, and it was, I believe, Buddy Carter. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe this is the same Buddy Carter that actually, um, yeah, this is this is the guy who is in our leadership position. He's, I believe, the insurance commissioner right now. I believe he's someone that actually was born in Mexico, an immigrant himself, by the way, who's now claimed that he is against immigration, even quote unquote legal immigration. So these people, they are using this as a way to say, look, they are saying no undocumented immigrants. Okay. But now they're saying also that they don't want immigrants at all. Right. So this is their game. This is their what they're playing at, right? They don't want to have diverse voices. They want to go back to what, an all white Anglo like country. No, that is not what's gonna happen. Because the reality is that this country was built on the backs of slave labor, of Native American labor, of immigrants, right? This is the country that's being built on the backs of those people that, again, are not white, are not those that they're looking to protect the sanctity of, right? So I tell people, look, ICE is a distraction. And it is a danger because also they are deporting people. They're breaking apart families, and they're doing that in an exponential rate than other administrations. Look, I'll give you an example. I went down to South Georgia a couple of months ago, and there was the largest workplace raid in history, in recorded history. It was the Hyundai, the meta plant there, right, that happened. And yep, you've heard of that, right? Because again, this was such a big issue that the entire community, the city area after that was a ghost town. It was barren, demolished almost. Everyone else moved out. All the kids that were enrolled in schools were disenrolled. They were taken out of school by their parents because their parents can't trust schools to protect their kids anymore. They can't trust that yellow big school bus that'll come by home will also not have an ICE agent attached to that or have an agent right behind that, right? They can't trust that. And because they can't trust the safety and well-being of their kids, they're moving out. And we've seen that even that was rural Georgia, but even in Metro Atlanta, even my own county, there are roads where there are reports of ICE agents, where there are reports of the sheriff's department, right, of our duly elected sheriff that is now collaborating with ICE. There are solid reports of that because the reality is that now in the state of Georgia, the state capital, the state legislature has made it so that now sheriff department, local police departments are forced to collaborate. They're forced to go back to the 287G program, which essentially deputizes them to become ICE agents themselves when they are not that. Their sole duty is to protect the people of their county, of their community, not to do Trump's bidding or ICE bidding. It's not.
Exactly. Using local resources for federal operations is insane to me. And
Yeah.
if that's going to be the case, if local law enforcement first of all, thank you for mentioning about 287G.
Yes.
I've explained this numerous times on this podcast because there is no state law and there is no federal law that states that local authorities have to cooperate with federal agents. There is no such thing yet. Now,
Mhm.
some states, like you said, Georgia, and then here in Kansas, like our Kansas Bureau of Investigation, like statewide, is
Yeah.
cooperating with DHS and federal agents. There was a city council member in
Mm.
Lenexa, Kansas, that was targeted by the Kansas Bureau of Investigation.
Mm.
It was a really horrific case. I could send that to you offline
Yes.
because I want to show you kind of like what's happening. And obviously, these 287G contracts literally opens the doors to massive issues.
They do.
And it is pure insanity. It seriously is, Nico. It is
It
literally pure
is.
insanity. And thank you for talking about rural because rural, again, is left out of the conversation too.
They are. Always are.
And farmers are the backbone of our country. And whenever the farmers are not able to do their jobs, we have a problem. We have a massive problem.
Yeah, that they make up our agricultural industry, right? So you cannot tell me that this is good for Georgia workers. It is not. We, as a result, our economy is going to significantly drop. We have seen businesses which build their profits on the backs of immigrants that are now recording loss in profits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why? Well, we don't know why.
Because
And
greed.
what is so I'm gonna be a bit more honest and personal about this, right? There are, and maybe many of us here that are watching or listening to this know of businesses. It doesn't have to be big businesses, but businesses nonetheless that are employing undocumented folks, right? They are. And as a result, they know they're getting away with paying them little to nothing
Mm-hmm.
because that worker cannot complain to the IRS. They can't complain to their government. They can't complain to the police because they are at the risk of getting deported, even though maybe many of them have, maybe their visas expired, right? Many of them have never committed a single crime, and they're just working day and night to put food on the table, to put a roof over their head, and their bosses are taking advantage of that. Which, by the way, their same bosses actually vote for Trump, which is ironic, right? Because given that Trump is now wanting to do all this ICE, they're wanting to deplete their labor, right? But I tell it because there is so much hypocrisy going on in businesses all throughout us, right? Where there are many businesses who will keep quiet, who will hush about their undocumented labor that are toiling in the back, in the kitchen, in these areas, right? They don't want to mention that. You know, they don't, and I will, right? Now, of course, I have to be careful because there are people on the grounds that I don't want to risk their job security. I don't want them to risk their well-being or safety, which is why I am very careful when I'm exposing them. I'm not exposing their identity, but I do know that there are many businesses who engage these corrupt practices where they abuse their undocumented workers. And even some that are also with work visas, they still abuse them though, because unfortunately, a lot of immigrants they don't know the rights they have. They don't,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is why
Mm-hmm.
I'm very for implementing a know your rights training, right? At every level of the government, right? Even in schools, implement know your rights trainings early on, so kids know that this is what powers, this is what constitutional rights they have as someone who lives there, right? So I am very much for educating the entire population. I believe education is the greatest equalizer, and so because of that, we cannot continue to just roll over and allow ICE to run its rampant destructive behavior all throughout this great state of Georgia.
Mm-hmm. 100%. We have a lot of issues, and we need to get the people that understand those issues. And I've always been told, and I've been told this ever since I was a younger kid, that the people that are the closest to the problem have the best solutions.
Correct.
And what better way to tackle a lot of the issues that are affecting our communities than putting the people who these issues are affecting making those decisions, making those policies to help everybody. I agree with you about know your rights trainings. I've been through one myself, and I even learned things that I didn't even know about. I think it's
Me too.
deeply important, even if you are not an immigrant, you might know somebody who is,
Correct.
or your neighbor, or your coworker, or somebody. We all have immigrants in our lives, and immigrants are what makes America great. That is what makes America thrive. Because guess what? Immigrants pay the highest taxes and they don't get the same benefits as anybody else. That is the
Correct.
number one fact that really destroyed me whenever I looked more into it. I am just a content creator slash independent journalist, podcast host, whatever you want to call me. But in the end, I've lived in poverty. Um,
Yes.
I am a survivor of sexual assault, domestic violence myself. Two of my closest friends were shot and killed over random bullshit, and my partner is transgender. Okay, so
Yeah.
there's, and I have a poodle. But anyway, I've mentioned my poodle on here numerous times because he's my emotional support poodle.
Zach, I believe you're muted.
It didn't mute. Is that better?
I can't hear you.
Better?
Yes, so sorry about that. Yes,
What in the hell just happened?
you're so good. The last part I mentioned was you mentioned that your partner was transgender. That's the last thing I heard.
My partner is transgender and I have a poodle.
Oh.
Okay. My poodle, and he's like staring at me. You know, if you're listening to this, you would know that my poodle gives me a lot of looks. He gives me the side eye. But in the end, he's also my emotional support poodle. He's my ESP.
Oh.
You know, Erica Kirk has emotional support fireworks. I have an emotional support. I have an emotional support
There
poodle.
we go. There we go.
But
They
you
don't
know,
want to play that game. We can play the game as well. We
oh,
can.
absolutely, 100%. I think my poodle could run an organization better than Erica Kirk ever could. But anyway,
You probably
um,
could. Of
how can people uplift the work that you are doing, and how can
course.
people contribute to your campaign and then follow you on social media?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Well, truly, I just say that word of mouth is incredibly important, right? For anyone that is, even if they don't live in the district. I mean, I tell people that, look, this is a movement. This is a part of a movement that is much greater than one person. It is greater than myself. It is greater than it is serving all of us, right? All of us that are listening to this podcast, all of us that are listening that are doing the work day in, day night, right? Even those that are unrecognized, right? We have many people who are shadowy figures, those that do so much work for our communities who never get recognition, right? For those people, we understand that we are doing this for a much greater reason, which is that we want relief. We want folks to be able to live a dignified life, a life free of worry from the economic status of what's going on right now, free from the worry of this tyrannical federal administration that is attacking Americans, that is anti-American, anti-democratic, anti-patriotic rather. And I want people to realize that you have so much power that you may not fully realize that, especially at the local level, where these elections get decided by 5 votes, 20 votes, 30 votes, right? The margin is so minimal, so little that you have so much power at the local level, that you have so much power being able to talk to your city councilman, talk to your county commissioner, talk to your sheriff, your water board member, to your board of education member, to me. I'm a state representative. I represent 60,000 people in my district. I fight for all 60,000 people of my district. I pass bills that will affect all Georgians, but my primary focus is of the people of my district. And I tell people, look, you need to elect folks who have that in mind, who realize that their bosses are the people that elected them, the
Mm-hmm.
people that are there to they are there to serve. We are, look, the politician title has, in my opinion, a well-deserved connotation of something very negative, because we have heard politicians and the way that it's been used as a way or to weaponize against our communities. We have seen that time and time again from both parties, right? Now I'm telling people, look, politicians, whatever title we want to use, we need to bring public servants specifically back into the definition of what a elected official, politician, whatever should be, because they serve the people. And it's not the other way around. You don't get rich and engorge yourself on the taxpayer money, on the taxpayer dime. You don't wine and dine and go around the city and go into nice places on the taxpayer dime. You do not do that. You serve the people. And I know, like, for example, my salary, to give you a bit of context, is low. It is $27,000 a year, right? And they also another reason why it's so low is because they actually don't want actual workers to be in these positions. They don't want actual working class people to be in these positions. They want CEOs, lawyers, hedge funds, all these different people that have so much money in the world that they can just run for office, pay like they don't have to fundraise at all, any grassroots. They have their own self-funded campaign, and as a result, they are not held responsible to the people of their district. And so that is what I'm telling people. Look into every single candidate. I don't know where you're from. I don't care where you're from. If you're from Georgia, if you're from all parts of the West Coast, East Coast, Central, right? look into your local candidate, look into your state representative and state senator, and look and see what do they really do? What do they truly represent? What are they saying? But also beyond what they're saying, because you can give lip service like crazy, right? You have people that are trained by PR to say the right things, but what is their actual voting record? What does it look like? Have you ever seen them do a town hall in your area? Have you ever seen them be in your community? Have you ever seen the local? We here in Georgia, we have a lot of Waffle House locations, right? We have different chain stores, right? Have you ever seen them at any local business or area in your district? And if the answer is no, reconsider why they're there. Consider why they're there, and reconsider perhaps putting a new person in that position, electing a new person in that position. Because again, politicians should not be worshipped. They are not to be worshipped. They are there to work, to put in the work. That is what we elect them for, and that is what I want people to know, that that is what I'm going to do for them, even without the title, even with the title of state representative, right? Even before then, I've been putting in the work for many years, and I continue to do that for many more years as well. So I want people to know that is who I am. That is who Nico Parra is. Nico Parra will fight for every single person in my district, and the working class people of this district deserve so much better. They deserve so much better given the circumstances and the world, that the climate that this world is in right now, right? They need a fighter. They need someone who is able to put everything on the line and say, look, I work for you, I serve you, I am your elected official, I am your advocate, your greatest representative, your greatest advocate. I am there to help fix things and not add on to the problems. So that is what I want people to recognize, right? That is who I am. That is a part of the greater campaign we're working on. And look, again, my platform, everything is accessible, transparent. I tell people straight up, this is my policies. I will never lie to you. What you see on the website is what I will do. You hear me speaking on this podcast, on interviews, or wherever you hear me at, is what I will do, right? So go to votenicoparra.com. First name, last name, NICOPARRA. Go to that website and see for yourself what policies I will support. And look, two
Mm-hmm.
years from now, take a look at Nico Parra. If all goes well, you will see me elected Representative Nico Parra, and you will see my voting record. You will see, okay, Nico voted yes for a moratorium. Nico voted yes for minimum wage increase. Nico voted against, right, ice in our streets and our roads, right? Nico voted yes to increase the minimum wage, to decrease property tax and income tax, right, to ensure that we have more funding for public schools, expand Medicaid. Nico voted yes for that. And Nico had town halls, events, job fairs, community accessibility events everywhere. People knew who Nico was, and Nico did the work for them. My office did the work for them, because also it takes a village. I want people to understand that it's not just one person, but also I am surrounded by multiple people who help me become the person I am, who help me do the work I do. I knock on hundreds of doors every week, but I also know that I have an entire community that's also knocking doors on my behalf, talking to people on my behalf, right? So again, truly grateful that I'm surrounding myself with the right people that believe in affordability and accessibility for every single Georgia. That is the people I surround myself with, and you will see myself surrounded with those type of people for many more years as well. So that is the lasting impression that I want to give people, our viewers, those that are listening and tuning into this podcast.
Absolutely. Nico, thank you so much for just being a badass human being. And this has been one of the best conversations on this podcast because
You,
it's the grassroots power that
yeah,
matters the most. And we are grassroots, you are grassroots from one
yeah,
to another. This is how it's done.
it is.
But
It
again,
is.
thank you. And I
Thank
look
you.
forward to hearing more from you and watching your campaign. And I am sending you all of the positive vibes
Thank
because
you.
May 19th is your primary, correct? Nope, May 5th.
I
Wait,
Well,
hold
so
on.
May 19th is the
Hold on.
primary date, and we are the only. So right now, because this is the only Democratic primary, I don't have any Republican opponents. I win May 19th. That means that I win. That I am now the representative elect, and I go straight to working for the people. There we go.
Oh, I love that.
Yep.
Oh, I love that. Please update me. I'll be
I will.
watching because
I
it's
will.
important. Get out and
Yes.
vote for Nico if you are in this District 109, right?
Yes.
I don't know how
Absolutely.
I remembered that, but I
You
did
have good
it.
memory.
But take care of yourself. Good
Thank you
luck,
so much.
and I will see you soon, okay?
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.